When I left my troubled marriage and returned to my parents' house with my 2 children, I believed it was a temporary safe haven. I thought they'd welcome us, especially after everything I had sacrificed to stay afloat. But I underestimated how deep their favoritism my sister's son, the so-called golden grandchild, was everything to them. Spoiled, arrogant, and cruel, he could do no wrong in their eyes. And slowly, I realized my children were being pushed aside, silenced, and eventually, discarded, when my parents made the unforgivable choice to evict us so their favorite grandson could have more space. Something inside me snapped. They expected me to disappear quietly, like I always did. But this time, I didn't. This is the story of how I exposed them, made them face the truth, and reclaimed what they tried to take from me: my dignity, my children's worth, and the justice we all deserved. The tale of betrayal, twisted family dynamics, and a reckoning that no one saw coming. When I pulled into my parents' driveway that rainy Thursday afternoon, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. The kids were asleep in the back, their faces peaceful for the first time in weeks, unaware of the storm we were heading into. I told myself this would be temporary. A couple of months, just until I got back on my feet. After all, I was their daughter. Their only daughter. Surely they'd understand that I had no choice and why divorce had left me emotionally drained and financially cornered. My ex-husband's charm had faded quickly after the wedding, and in its place came manipulation, gaslighting, and eventually the kind of emotional neglect that leaves invisible bruises. When he stopped pretending altogether and told me he wanted a new life, without baggage, I packed my things, took my kids, and walked out. I hadn't lived with my parents in over a decade. But I remembered warmth. I remembered my mother's chicken soup when I was sick, my dad fixing my bike when I fell. I remembered a home. What I returned to was something else entirely. They barely looked up when I came in. My mother gave me a tight smile, the kind you give someone you're tolerating out of obligation. My father grunted something I couldn't quite hear. My kids, bless them, ran in calling Grandma, Grandpa, with open arms. My father muttered, "Careful with the carpet," and my mother winced when my daughter's muddy shoes touched the entryway. Still, I smiled. I kept smiling. I told myself they just needed time to adjust. They hadn't expected this. Neither had I. The first night, I overheard them whispering in the kitchen. "It's just temporary," my mom said. "We can't let her ruin everything. You know how he is." He being Mason, my sister Claire's son. The family prodigy. At 10 years old, he already had a room here filled with trophies, an iPad in every color, and a set of grandparents who treated his every tantrum like a performance worth applause, tried to ignore it. But things started changing fast. My kids weren't allowed in the living room when Mason was over. My son's soccer ball was too noisy. My daughter's drawings left a mess. They had to play in the garage, next to boxes of Christmas lights and mildew. One night, I came home from a job interview to find their clothes dumped in trash bags. My mother said Mason needed the drawers, confronted her, trying to stay calm. "Mom, they're your grandchildren too." She shrugged. "Yes, but Mason's here more often. He's part of our daily life. Your kids, well, it's temporary, isn't it?" I didn't sleep that night. My kids did, curled up in the same bed, unaware that their place in the world was already being bargained away. Then came the final blow point. One Saturday morning, I returned from picking up groceries to find Mason in the kitchen, eating my son's favorite cereal. When I gently told him it wasn't his, he looked me in the eye and said, "Grandma said you don't live here for real. So nothing's really yours." I looked at my mother, standing behind him with folded arms, saying nothing. And it hit me, he was repeating what he heard. They were all thinking it. That we were intruders. That we were disposable. 3 days later, I got the text from my dad. Not even a call. "You'll need to find another place by the end of the month. Mason's moving in full-time while Claire travels." He needs the space. No apology. No explanation. Just eviction. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My daughter walked in, holding a picture she'd drawn of our family. Us. Them. Smiling, I knew then something had broken that wouldn't be fixed with time. But I also knew one more thing: I wasn't going to let them erase my children. Not again. Not quietly. They thought I'd leave with my tail between my legs. They forgot who raised me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at that text and felt everything inside me go cold. There was a kind of silence that settled over me. Not peaceful, but final. Like the last second before a storm hits. My parents didn't want us there. Not because they couldn't help, but because they wouldn't. Because Mason's comfort meant more to them than our existence. Packed slowly that night, careful not to let my kids see the panic simmering just under my skin. They were watching a movie in the garage, the only place where they didn't get shushed or glared at. My son asked if we'd be going back to our real house soon. I smiled and said, "Sooner than you think." He cheered. He thought it meant stability. He had no idea we had nowhere to go. I reached out to a friend from college, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Her voice cracked when I told her the story. She didn't hesitate. "You can crash here for now. It's tight, but we'll make it work." I could have cried from relief, but instead I thanked her with a steadiness I didn't feel. I had to stay strong. For them, when I told my parents we'd be leaving in the morning, my mom blinked like she didn't understand. "You don't have to rush," she said, almost too casually. "We said end of the month." I looked at her. "You made your choice. I'm just making mine." My father didn't even come out of his office. As we loaded the car, Mason watched from the upstairs window. He waved. Not out of kindness, out of triumph. My daughter waved back, still too innocent to realize what had just happened to us. Living with my friend wasn't easy. We shared a single room. I worked 2 jobs, one as a receptionist at a dentist's office, another cleaning offices at night. My kids adjusted faster than I did. They made friends at the nearby park, built forts out of couch cushions, treated every dinner like a celebration. I envied their resilience, but I couldn't shake the bitterness. Not just from what my parents did, but from the way they justified it to themselves. I saw Claire's Instagram posts, Mason's new room, captioned with thanks, Mom and Dad, for always being there. I saw the comments from extended family praising how generous and involved my parents were. No one knew the truth. I could have let it go. I almost did. But then something happened that changed everything. 6 months later, I got a call from my daughter's school. She had drawn a picture during art class and told the teacher that she missed her old grandma, before she forgot about us. The teacher gently asked if something had happened. I laughed it off, but inside, I was shattered. They hadn't just kicked us out, they'd erased us. I realized then that silence was a kind of consent. That if I didn't speak up, they'd get to keep telling their version of the story. And Mason would grow up thinking he won. That they won. I did what I hadn't done in years. I spoke. I wrote a post, raw, unfiltered, unapologetic. I didn't name names, but I didn't hide the truth either. I shared how a family can smile in your face while slowly dismantling your worth. How favoritism isn't just toxic, it's violent. It tells some children they matter more, and others that they don't matter at all. I posted it late at night. I expected it to be ignored. By morning, it had gone viral, comments flooded in. People telling me they'd lived the same story. That they too had been cast aside for a sibling's child. That their parents chose one grandchild to elevate and left the others behind. The messages kept coming. Stories. Confessions. Rage. Solidarity, and then I got one message I didn't expect. It was from my cousin Hannah. "You're not the only one," she wrote. They did something similar to me a few years ago. I thought I was crazy. Thank you for saying it out loud. That's when I knew I wasn't just exposing my parents. I was unraveling a legacy. The next week, I got a call from Claire. She was furious. How dare you make mom and dad look like monsters online? I didn't yell. I didn't even flinch. I just said, if the truth makes them look like monsters, that's not my fault. She hung up. I smiled, but the silence didn't last long. A few days later, I got an email from my mother. 3 words, we need to talk. I stared at the email for a long time. We need to talk. No greeting. No context. Just that cold, clipped sentence. It read like a summons, not a request. Part of me wanted to delete it and move on. But the other part, the part that still remembered bedtime stories, birthday cakes, and family photos on the mantle, clicked reply, agreed to meet them at a neutral place. Not their house. Not mine. A cafe halfway between. I didn't tell the kids. I didn't want them involved unless this led to something real. Something different. When I arrived, they were already seated. My father looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair. My mother wore her usual mask of calm authority, but I could see the tightness in her jaw. She opened with a line I'd heard too many times, this has all gotten out of hand. Not we're sorry. Not how are the kids. Just a complaint that the fallout had become inconvenient. I didn't expect it to go viral, I said, keeping my voice steady. I just told the truth. My father sighed. You made us look like we abandoned our family. I met his eyes. Didn't you? My mother leaned forward. You don't understand the pressure we were under. Claire was going through a hard time. Mason needed stability. And my kids didn't? I asked. You chose one grandchild over the others. You kicked us out. You didn't call, didn't check in. And now you're upset because people are finally seeing you for who you are. We didn't kick you out, she snapped. We just needed space. I laughed. Loudly. Not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe they still believed their own version of events. You texted me. You gave me 2 weeks to move out with my children. You gave Mason their drawers, their room, their place in your home. You made it very clear who mattered more. They didn't respond. Just silence. Then my mother said something I'll never forget. Well, maybe if you had your life more together, we wouldn't have had to make that decision. I froze. There it was. The root of it all. Their conditional love, masked as concern. Their judgment, cloaked in passive-aggressive disappointment. I stood up. You made a choice. And now I'm making mine. You don't get access to my children anymore. That got their attention. My father finally spoke. You can't keep them from us. I can. And I will. My mother's eyes widened. You're punishing us. No, I said. I'm protecting them. I left the cafe shaking, not with fear, but with clarity. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the child trying to please them. I felt like the mother I needed to be. The next few weeks were quiet. No emails. No calls. Just a void where family used to be, but something strange happened. People kept sharing my story. Other mothers. Grown children. Estranged siblings. It had become bigger than me. I started getting requests to speak on podcasts, to write op-eds. I declined. Most. I wasn't looking for fame. But I did write one follow-up post. I shared how silence can feel like safety, but it's actually permission. That when we normalize toxic family dynamics, we don't just hurt ourselves, we pass the poison down. I wrote, my children may have lost grandparents, but they gained a mother who finally stopped apologizing. It resonated. The comments. were a mix of heartbreak and fury. People tagging siblings, sending it to parents, posting their own stories. Then came the next unexpected twist. Claire messaged me. "I had no idea," she wrote. "They never told me they kicked you out." I didn't know what to believe. But curiosity overpowered anger. We agreed to meet. No kids. Just us. She looked different, tired, thinner, softer. She admitted she was overwhelmed, that our parents had always propped her up, made decisions for her, insulated her from the consequences. "I let them control everything," she said. "I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to know. I told her everything. The garage. The trash bags. The eviction text." She cried. Real tears. "I thought they were helping me," she whispered. "I didn't know they were destroying you." We sat there, two daughters from the same house, finally seeing each other for the first time. She asked to meet my kids. I told her it would take time, because trust, once shattered, doesn't rebuild overnight, and because the story wasn't over. Not yet. Claire started calling. Slowly. Gently. Like she was afraid of scaring me off. Her messages weren't about our parents or Mason. They were about my kids. How were they adjusting? Did they like school? What were their favorite shows? I didn't know what her intentions were at first, but I was cautious. Every step forward was tiny, deliberate. I wasn't going to let anyone else hurt my children, not even family with good intentions. It was a rainy Saturday when we met again. This time, she brought Mason. I hesitated at the door when I saw him, taller now, more reserved. I remembered him with sticky fingers and a smug smile, the way he used to glare at my daughter as if she were in his way. But this time, he held a wrapped box in his hand and didn't speak until I nodded. "I brought this for her. And for him, too," he said. "If they want it." It was a peace offering. A small one. Inside were two simple toys, new, not expensive, but chosen with care. Mason stood quietly in the corner of the living room while Claire and I talked. My kids peeked around the hallway, curious. I let them come in. No forced hugs. Just space to breathe. My daughter approached Mason first. "Do you still have the room with the window stars?" He nodded. "I liked that room," she said. "I didn't like when Grandma said I couldn't play there anymore." There was no accusation in her voice, just a child's memory, raw and honest. Mason looked down. "I'm sorry." It was the first time I believed maybe he hadn't known what was really happening. Maybe he was just another child stuck inside the myth of favoritism, held up so high that no one thought to ask how. He felt about it. Over the next few weeks, something strange began to happen. Claire and I started talking regularly. She admitted she was going to therapy. That our talk had opened something in her she hadn't even realized was shut. That for years, she'd felt like she was performing a role, the successful one, the perfect mother, crafted by our parents. And impossible to maintain. She was unraveling that identity now, stitch by painful stitch, and then she told me something that stopped me cold. "Do you remember Anna?" The name hit me like a punch. I hadn't heard it in years. Anna was our cousin. My mom's sister's daughter. A bright, laughing girl who used to spend summers with us. Then, one year, she didn't come back. Our parents said her family moved. No explanation. Claire looked haunted. She didn't move. They cut her off. What? They told Aunt Linda to stop bringing her around. Said she was a bad influence. Because she had a learning disability. Because she was different. I sat back, stunned. "They made it sound like protecting the family image," Claire said. "Like it was for the greater good." And just like that, it all clicked. It wasn't just me. Or my kids. It was a pattern. A history. A legacy of erasure. Anyone who didn't fit their mold, anyone who complicated the narrative of perfection, was quietly removed. Forgotten. Anna was their first victim. I was next. My children were supposed to follow, but we didn't. We spoke. We stayed. We made noise. I found Anna online that night. It took hours, but I found her. She lived 2 states over. She was a teacher now. And when I messaged her, she responded within minutes. I always wondered why they stopped calling, she wrote. I thought it was something I did. My throat tightened as I typed, "It wasn't you. It was them." We talked for hours. She remembered the same family dinners, the same laughter. And the same sudden silence. Her voice, even through text, was cautious but kind. She hadn't spoken to anyone from our side of the family in 20 years. "They made me feel invisible," she said. "I know," I replied. "Me too." The next day, I shared part of her story, with her permission, on the same platform where I had first shared mine. I didn't use her full name. But I told the truth. The comments exploded. People didn't just resonate, they recognized her story in their own families. The golden child. The scapegoat. The erased. We weren't rare. We were a pattern. A cycle, but we were breaking it now. One voice at a time. One truth at a time. My parents hadn't reached out again. Not a single word after our last meeting, but they didn't need to, because the final reckoning was coming, and this time, I wasn't alone. I didn't expect the letter. It came in a cream envelope, hand-addressed. I stared at the familiar handwriting, unsure whether to open it or burn it. My parents hadn't reached out in months. After everything that had happened, after the post, the interviews, the stories, I thought they had decided to simply vanish from my life, in their usual way. Cut, isolate, forget. It was their pattern. But this letter, it was something else. A relic from a past that refused to stay buried. Opened it slowly, half bracing for manipulation disguised as guilt. It was 4 pages long. My mother's handwriting. Steady and neat. And cold, she opened with what she called regret over the way things unfolded. Not an apology, just regret, like someone mourning bad weather. She acknowledged the public attention my story brought and said it had deeply embarrassed the family. Not hurt. Not wounded. Embarrassed, she wrote that she and my father had always tried their best and that family matters should remain private. She said she was concerned that I was teaching my children to resent their elders, that I was creating division where unity was needed most. She ended the letter with a sentence that chilled me: "You have every right to tell your story, but remember that stories shape minds, and once a child sees their grandparent as a villain, they may never unsee it." She wasn't reaching out to heal. She was trying to reclaim control. I folded the letter neatly and put it in a drawer. I didn't reply, but I knew then what I needed to do. For years, I'd been the quiet one. The daughter who kept the peace. The single mom who didn't cause trouble. The woman who made herself small to survive. But not anymore. A podcast producer who had followed my online posts reached out again. This time, I said yes. They wanted me to tell the whole story. Not just the viral parts. Not just the headline, the whole truth. I told them about the garage. The cereal box. The trash bags. The eviction text. I told them about Anna. About Claire. About the legacy of silence that suffocated every room in that house. I didn't cry during the recording, not because I wasn't emotional, but because I had already cried enough. My voice stayed steady. Firm. Tired, but unshakable. When the episode aired, the response was overwhelming. People didn't just listen, they shared. They sent voicemails, emails, video messages. Strangers told me they had finally stood up to toxic family members. Some said they'd finally found the words for things they'd buried for years. One message stayed with me. A woman said, "You made me feel sane. Like I wasn't imagining it. Thank you." That's when I understood, this wasn't just about revenge. It was about validation, and why parents had built a home where love was earned and favoritism was disguised as structure. They believed silence kept the family together. But silence doesn't preserve, it rots. I was done rotting. The most powerful moment came quietly. One night, I was tucking my daughter into bed. She looked up at me and asked, "Are we going to Grandma's for Christmas?" I froze. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was just asking. I sat on the edge of her bed. "No," I said gently. "Not this year." "Because of the room?" I paused. "Because they didn't treat us the way we deserve." She nodded, eyes big and wise. "I like how you treat us." She turned over, pulling her blanket up, and fell asleep like she always did, as safe. When I realized something important, I didn't need them to apologize anymore. I didn't need them to understand what they had done or to rewrite the past, had already broken the cycle, and I was raising children who would never wonder if they were enough, was raising children who would never confuse love with permission to be mistreated. They had taken my home, but I had built another point one with truth point one with peace point one where the door doesn't open for anyone who teaches my children to shrink. This is my family now, and for the first time in my life, it finally feels like mine.